You know you're in emotional repression when you got like this persistent body contraction, and no matter how much you meditate or no how many like realizations or shifts that you have, it's still tight there, or it still hurts there, or it's still just contracted there. And you may have like different frameworks for that during the years, like, oh, that's maybe you thought it was an illness, or you called it a disease, or you just then called it just my stomach contraction or a sensation arising to awareness. But I think you know you're in well, you don't know. That's what makes it ironic. So when you're just, in other words, resting with a contraction or sensation as part of your way of relating to it, just letting it be there. It sounds perfect, doesn't it? That pointer, just do nothing with that. It's a sensation. That's all it is. Why would you do something with it? And then you hear the other things and say, well, that's just an ego that would do something with it anyway. So many of us don't. Or if we begin to inquire, we don't go deep enough into it, or we're not skillful enough. So we just rest with it. We just let it be, and it persists. And as you'll see with this work, anything that persists is very telling. Like chronic pain or persistent contraction or depression or disease that persists, because it's like our body's creating it to keep us safe from what we buried. Because as science says, emotional repression drives a lot of suffering. So you know you're in repression, or I could say you don't know if you're just resting with it, or you're doing the kind of inquiry that doesn't get to the programming inside the sensation that says, I don't want to let this go. It's buried emotion. It feels like a contraction maybe, or pain, but it's actually concretized emotion or frozen emotion with programming in it that says, I can't feel and express that. And then a self-protection around that. And there's our trauma. But if we don't know that, we might just rest with it or let it be. So what I say is let it be throughout the day, always. Just let it be. But go into inquiry and you'll see the repression, and then that suffering can end once you learn the skills. So you know you're in repression on the spiritual path. In other words, this is all about being on the path. I'm going to do another video about like in relationship because it's fun. And I like to help people understand this because it freed me in so many ways, in ways that I could never experience before, just this work. So I just love sharing different ways about it, because if I can just, anybody, like people say, if one person can be changed. No, I want several. I want a lot of you guys to get it, you know? Maybe not even millions, maybe not even thousands, but if whoever gets it, any of this, and your practice changes, you'll thank me later. You'll curse me too on the way. That's part of it. But you'll thank me later if you stay with it. Okay, so if you're on a spiritual path, you know you're in emotional repression when you're rushing to awakening. This is what I did. It's like so many people do it. It's so natural, you can't stop it. It's like getting the bug. You know what I mean? You just have to awaken. You have to be free, or you have to heal, or it's just, you've got a hold of you in some way. But that rush to that future moment, you know you're in repression when you don't see that that's coming from the repression. That's how repression wants it. The seeking story of time gets created as part of the overall suffering created from repression to create the story of future, take you away from the buried emotion in the here and now, so that you don't even know that that's what's running it. And so, and therefore you don't know you're in repression. That's the irony. But now you know, right? At least you know it with your mind. And don't trust me. If even it doesn't matter whether you're agreeing or disagreeing with me, don't trust me. Just go to the thing that I'm going to tell you at the end and see for yourself. You know you're in repression on the spiritual path when you use inquiry or other processes to deal with what arises as a result of repression instead of getting to the root of the suffering, which is the repression buried in the body. So it would look like this. If my husband comes in the room and he says something and I feel wrong, I'm wrong. And I sit with the feeling of being wrong, which is on the surface. So it's not the repression, it's what the repression produced, but I rest with what is and the thoughts of being wrong, and I feel it and I allow it and I allow it and I process and bring more of being wrong up. And I miss the root of suffering the whole time. Because the sense of deficiency or lack or being wrong is coming from, I can't be myself in that moment if I can't. I might, if I were really conscious in my authentic self, I might say, fuck you, there's nothing wrong, I'm not doing anything wrong. Or I might say, that hurts, and I did something wrong, and I'm guilty. I might really be authentic. But if I can't, it just might be this trigger, into more of an identity and that protects me from what I buried. Because I didn't bury wrong. I buried hurt or anger, fear, sadness. The wrong is what the mind does to protect us from what we buried. Or I'm unlovable. He says something, I feel unlovable. That hurts. But that's safe compared to anger that I bury right then. Well, I don't show because I don't know that I have it. And then that buried anger produced that. So if you take inquiry or process just the wrong or allow just the wrong and not the root of the suffering, which is the repression that created it, you're probably in repression. You are in repression, not probably. But do you know it? No, you don't know it either. That's why you miss it. That's why I missed it. You know that whole thing, you're a redneck when? That's what this is. But this is not as funny. It's not funny. It's sad. Here's the sad one. You know you're in repression if you think that there's something wrong with you, if you think that you're unlovable, if you're not good enough. You feel that. You're in emotional repression, but you don't know it actually. Because, as I said, you are deficient. There's nothing wrong with you, but you are lacking. You are deficient. There is something missing in your experience. It's the emotion or emotions that you buried, the things that you've buried, that's missing. So that what the mind does is it spins it into a deficiency story or an identity that protects us from what's buried. So the mind will say, I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, but the body is holding anger or hurt, storing it so that you don't have it online. So you don't have parts of yourself. You can't be your authentic self. See, so there comes the deficiency story in the mind, which is not who you are, obviously. I mean, most of us know that's some sort of false belief, but it's there for a reason, to keep us safe from what we buried and so that we get love and approval from other people in relationship. Survive. So you're in emotional repression when you don't know all that in a way. You don't have your own words to describe that clearly, and you don't have your own practice to get to it. And you're in emotional repression when you're feeling judged by any of these things, because that's just another example of how deficiency or, separation comes up to protect us. I was triggered when I first heard this kind of thing, like, hey, Scott, you're in emotional repression, trigger. That protected me. Shame is even safer than buried anger to my consciousness. So I even felt a little bit of shame when someone said that, but that was still safer than what I was buried. My system produced the shame in that moment. Not the anger. So you're in emotional repression on the spiritual path or in spiritual practice when you don't think that suffering can end. Or maybe you haven't considered it because deficiency and lack makes us think small. And Our consciousness that has repression can't even imagine that kind of freedom. It's actually designed not to keep us safe. So if it seems like suffering can't end, you might have settled for like, well, there's just the awareness here and things coming and going. But to consider why they're still coming and going, why they're still suffering, not from an analytical standpoint, from awareness, using skills that prompt up the unconscious programming that still creates the suffering. And it's repression. You call it whatever you want, but it's programming in your body that's you're afraid to be yourself. So we just developed a method that gets to the various emotions that make it feel like you can't be yourself. And those are the emotions that are buried. So you wouldn't know that, right? Even as you sit here right now, unless you did this work, you wouldn't know. So you're in emotional repression when you're sitting here kind of going, I don't know if I'm in repression or if this is confusing, because our system produces that to keep us safe. Unless I'm just being not very clear, in which case that's on me, right? But, or maybe my repression or something. Anyway, yeah, because science says repression drives a lot of suffering. So we found it in our bodies here in this work, and that's why I'm sharing this. But many people come to this work or watch my videos who also watch other non-dual teachers. So I wanted to talk about it being on a path and not knowing, or knowing. Let me see if I can, yep, there's a few more coming here. Yeah, you know you're in repression if you listen to me talk about authenticity, for example, and you dismiss it, because there would be a vested interest in that. Because to actually consider authenticity, you would have to consider what's been buried, and our systems are designed to stay away from that. So you might just say, I did that. When I heard people talking about authenticity and spirituality, I was using awakening to annihilate or escape the human experience. But I didn't know it. So to come down to repression is to come more fully in into being human, conscious, and authentic. Because how can you be here now if you can't be here now in relationship? Or with whatever comes, with whatever you're holding? Because that's now, right? So that's what I've learned. You know you're in emotional repression when you don't think relationship work is important on the path. Because be here now means also, and mostly, be here now with the people that you love. But repression is most active there. Suffering is most active there. So yeah, we can be here now together if we don't include our loved ones. But so you might be in emotional repression if you're using spirituality to get away from life or relationships, but you may not know it. Well, now you do, though. Or it's at least something to investigate, right? Investigate everything that's you're suffering, because you may not know it, but that's the repression creating it. Or something close to it. It's the fear. If you don't have to call it repression, it's the fear that you hold in your body that holds emotion and things back to get love and approval and survive in this world. I mean, you can use different words, but if you go into your body, you'll find the actual programming and the emotions that are buried and the responses and all that. And you can see that actually the suffering comes from it. You can actually see that it produces the suffering in your life to keep you safe from the buried stuff. Once you become skillful, you can see it. With just a few skills. Oh, and so you know you're in emotional repression on the path if you think the whole point of it is just peace. Because that's what anger repressors would think. But this is so much more dynamic than that. You know, presence, like it includes all the emotions, like the full spectrum of everything that is and could be you. That's very dynamic. To just settle for, I mean, there's peace in it, but peace is just woven into the fabric of that aliveness. So, you know, if you're just settling for, and I can understand it, because if we're suffering, why wouldn't we want peace? But you know you're in repression if you settle for that. And you know you're in repression if you have a perceptual shift, like you actually recognize the presence and you just want to jump to I'm done. Because how would you know that? And if there's any energy on I'm done or not done, wouldn't that just be something in the body to investigate? And doesn't that end up still just being the same fear? Our suffering decides when we're done, not us. If you haven't started the work, there's the free repression test at the bottom of killaby.com. It's a free test to start. And I also put the link in the comments or the description here. And also, I want to say there's a big retreat. I'm going to put that link down here too. There's a retreat that me and Toshi and Ina and Dan are doing. It's the first time we're bringing this work out to the public because we've kept it in the members area, the 3D work. So if you've wondered what it's all about, we're going to sum it all up for you and show you the skills in this retreat that we're doing for the first time. So I'm going to put a link to that here also. So I might just actually invite you over to take the repression test at the bottom of killaby.com and then put the retreat link here for you. Check it out. Thank you.